Steel echoed through the valley, long before anyone saw the men carrying it. Dust rolled across broken roads. Radios crackled with frantic voices in languages from opposite sides of the world. Somewhere beyond the smoke, a single burst of automatic fire cut through the chaos, then another, then dozens more, until the sharp rhythm became almost impossible to distinguish from the explosions surrounding it. Soldiers dropped into the dirt. Others rushed forward without knowing exactly where the shots were coming from. Vehicles stopped. Helicopters circled overhead, searching for a target that seemed to appear everywhere at once. The battlefield had become a place where visibility meant almost nothing because the weapon responsible could emerge from a jungle trail, a frozen mountain pass, a shattered city street, or the window of a ruined farmhouse. The men holding it were often farmers one month, factory workers the next, and soldiers only when history forced them to become one. Entire military plans collapsed under the relentless sound of its fire. Generals searched for answers. Intelligence officers collected damaged examples from battlefields, convinced they had discovered only another foreign rifle. They were wrong. They were looking at a machine that would reshape warfare across nearly every continent on Earth. Yet no one standing in that smoke understood just how far its influence would reach. They only knew that battles were beginning to end differently than expected. Armies equipped with expensive technology suddenly struggled against opponents carrying a remarkably simple weapon. The balance between industrial power and determined resistance had begun to shift. But this machine was never supposed to exist. Years earlier, another battlefield had revealed an uncomfortable truth. The Second World War had ended, but its lessons refused to disappear. Soviet officers walked through the ruins of Eastern Europe, studying abandoned German weapons with unusual fascination. Victory had come at an enormous cost, and nobody inside the Kremlin believed the next war would be any smaller. Entire cities had vanished beneath artillery fire. Millions had died. Factories that once produced tractors now built tanks. Railways carried ammunition instead of passengers. Peace looked temporary. The Soviet Union emerged victorious but exhausted. Military planners already imagined another conflict, this time against former allies whose political speeches had grown colder with every passing month. The Cold War had not yet received its famous name, but its shadow was already stretching across Europe. Inside Soviet headquarters, one question dominated every discussion. How could an ordinary infantryman survive the next war? Existing rifles reflected an older philosophy. Many fired powerful, full-sized cartridges designed for long-range precision. They were accurate, but heavy, difficult to control in automatic fire, slow during close combat. World War II had shown something different. Most firefights happened at shorter distances than military theorists once believed. German engineers had noticed it first. Near the end of the war, they introduced the revolutionary Sturmgewehr 44, combining manageable recoil with rapid automatic fire. Soviet officers examined captured examples with great interest. They did not simply admire the weapon, they recognized a warning. The future belonged to soldiers carrying lighter rifles capable of delivering fast, accurate fire during constantly moving battles. That realization triggered one of the most important military projects of the 20th century, but the solution would come from someone almost nobody expected. In 1943, Even before the war had officially ended, Soviet engineers developed a new intermediate cartridge, the 7.62 x 39mm round. It struck a careful balance between power and controllability. The ammunition itself represented a dramatic shift in military thinking. Instead of designing a rifle first and selecting ammunition afterward, the cartridge became the foundation upon which an entirely new class of infantry weapon would be built. Factories, laboratories, and military proving grounds suddenly found themselves racing toward the same objective. Every prototype attempted to answer the same question. Could one rifle replace several older weapons at once? The challenge sounded straightforward. Reality proved far more difficult. Several experienced designers entered the competition. Established engineers with impressive records submitted increasingly sophisticated prototypes. Some featured advanced machining, others borrowed ideas from captured German weapons. On paper, many looked excellent. During testing, they often failed. Mud jammed moving parts. Dust entered delicate mechanisms. Springs snapped. Bolts cracked under repeated firing. Soviet testing officers cared little for elegant engineering. If the rifle stopped working after falling into frozen slush or desert sand, reliability mattered more than beauty. Somewhere inside that demanding process, an unexpected name quietly appeared among the competitors. It belonged to a young tank sergeant recovering from wounds suffered during the war. His formal engineering education was limited. His practical understanding of battlefield reality was not. Mikhail Kalashnikov had experienced combat firsthand before injury removed him from the front. While recovering in hospital, he listened carefully to conversations among wounded soldiers. Their complaints rarely focused on courage. They talked about equipment, weapons that malfunctioned, designs that felt unnecessarily complicated, rifles difficult to maintain under impossible conditions. Those conversations stayed with him long after his recovery began. Rather than accepting existing solutions, he started sketching ideas of his own. At first, few people paid serious attention. The Soviet weapons industry already employed respected designers with years of professional experience. Why would military officials trust a wounded sergeant instead? Yet persistence often succeeds where reputation cannot. Kalashnikov continued refining his concepts, learning from every rejection, rather than abandoning the project altogether. Each failure became another lesson. Every criticism forced another improvement. The young inventor understood something that technical drawings alone could never teach. A rifle was not built for display cases or engineering exhibitions. It existed for exhausted soldiers whose hands shook from cold, fear, hunger, and fatigue. Under those conditions, simplicity became a weapon of its own. But another obstacle soon emerged. Simplicity alone would never satisfy Soviet military evaluators. The rifle had to survive abuse that bordered on impossible. It needed to function after being dragged through mud, buried beneath snow, coated with sand, neglected for days, and fired thousands of times with minimal maintenance. Meeting even one of those requirements challenged experienced engineering teams. Meeting all of them seemed nearly impossible, yet that was exactly what the Soviet Union demanded from the rifle intended to defend its future. Then something happened inside the testing facilities that changed the competition forever. Early reports suggested one prototype continued operating after others had already failed. Inspectors repeated the trials, convinced the results must have been accidental. They exposed the weapon to even harsher conditions. Again, it continued firing. History almost forgot those quiet moments inside the proving grounds because they lacked the drama of battlefield explosions. Yet they mattered just as much. The outcome of those tests would eventually influence revolutions, proxy wars, independence movements, and military doctrines across the globe. The engineers watching could not yet imagine the scale of what they had begun. Neither could the governments that would one day fear it. And the greatest challenge was still waiting beyond the factory gates. The celebrations never came. There were no dramatic speeches declaring victory inside the Soviet design bureaus, no triumphant parade honoring the engineers who believed they had solved the Red Army's greatest infantry problem. Instead, the rifle entered an even more demanding phase. Every promising design still had to survive the brutal reality of military testing, where optimism meant nothing and failure could arrive with a single broken part. Soviet inspectors treated every prototype as though it had already disappointed them. They buried rifles in sand, packed them with mud, soaked them in freezing water, and fired thousands of rounds until glowing barrels filled the air with the smell of burnt steel and gunpowder. Bolts slammed forward relentlessly. Springs compressed and expanded without mercy. Wooden stocks cracked under repeated abuse. Tiny mechanical flaws that seemed insignificant on an engineer's workbench suddenly became catastrophic under battlefield conditions. Several competing designs simply could not endure. Parts loosened, mechanisms jammed, accuracy deteriorated. Military evaluators crossed names off their lists one by one. Yet one rifle continued to draw attention for a reason that sounded almost too simple to be impressive. It just kept working. That reliability was no accident. Mikhail Kalashnikov had spent countless hours simplifying every internal component he could without sacrificing strength. His philosophy differed from many contemporary designers who pursued elegant mechanical solutions. Kalashnikov pursued survival. Every unnecessary part represented another opportunity for failure. Every complicated movement created another chance for dirt, dust, or ice to stop the weapon when a soldier needed it most. He understood that rifles rarely failed under perfect laboratory conditions. They failed after weeks of exhaustion, neglect, rain, and mud. So the design had to assume the worst instead of hoping for the best. But even Kalashnikov knew the rifle was far from finished. Early versions revealed weaknesses that demanded constant revision. Receivers required redesign. Manufacturing techniques proved difficult for Soviet factories that were still rebuilding after the devastation of World War II. Initial stamped sheet metal receivers appeared economical in theory, but created production problems that reduced consistency and durability. Engineers reluctantly shifted toward a heavier milled receiver, accepting additional machining because reliability remained the highest priority. The decision increased manufacturing complexity, but military officials believed dependable weapons justified the extra effort. That compromise would shape the rifle's earliest production models. Then another challenge emerged, one hidden not inside the rifle itself, but inside the factories expected to build hundreds of thousands of them. The Soviet Union faced enormous economic pressure. Entire industries were recovering from wartime destruction, while simultaneously preparing for a possible confrontation with the West. Every machine tool, every skilled worker, and every ton of steel mattered. Producing an advanced rifle meant little if factories could not manufacture it efficiently on a massive scale. Engineers therefore worked closely with industrial planners, modifying certain components not because they improved battlefield performance, but because they could be produced faster, cheaper, and with greater consistency across multiple arsenals. It was engineering shaped by geopolitics as much as by mechanics. Behind closed doors, debates became surprisingly intense. Some officials wanted greater accuracy, others demanded lighter weight. Some argued for more advanced machining, believing superior craftsmanship reflected Soviet technological prestige. Kalashnikov resisted unnecessary complexity. He insisted that the ordinary infantryman, not the engineer, should determine the rifle's priorities. A weapon that functioned every time would save more lives than one capable of slightly tighter groups on a target range. Those arguments were not always comfortable. Military procurement involved politics as much as performance. Careers depended upon procurement decisions. Rival designers defended years of work. Committees reviewed reports, repeated trials, and questioned assumptions. The competition was about far more than choosing a rifle. It represented the future direction of Soviet infantry doctrine. History almost turned in another direction during those meetings. Several excellent competitors remained under serious consideration. Some possessed innovative features that appeared technically superior in specific categories. Had a handful of test results changed, the rifle history remembers today might never have entered service at all. Yet repeated evaluations produced the same conclusion. The Kalashnikov design consistently demonstrated extraordinary resilience under conditions that defeated many of its rivals. That reputation grew stronger with every trial. Soldiers invited to test the weapon appreciated something engineers sometimes overlooked. Controls felt intuitive even under stress. Field stripping required relatively little time. Maintenance demanded fewer specialized tools. Inexperienced recruits learned the system quickly. Experienced veterans trusted it almost immediately. Confidence cannot be measured with rulers or calipers. Yet on the battlefield, it often becomes as valuable as ammunition itself. By 1947, the design had matured enough to receive the designation that would become one of the most recognized names in military history, Avtomat Kalashnikova 1947, the AK-47. The name reflected neither marketing nor mythology. It simply identified an automatic rifle associated with its designer and the year of its final development. No one involved imagined those two letters and two numbers would eventually become recognizable in nearly every language on Earth. Official adoption, however, did not instantly transform the rifle into a global symbol. Production remained limited, while factories refined manufacturing methods and corrected small imperfections discovered during early service. Soldiers continued reporting observations from training exercises. Engineers listened carefully. Minor modifications improved durability. Internal tolerances were adjusted. Components were strengthened. The rifle evolved quietly before the world truly noticed its existence. Then, An unexpected breakthrough changed everything. Soviet engineers gradually perfected stamped receiver technology that earlier generations had struggled to master. Improvements in metallurgy and manufacturing techniques allowed production to become faster, cheaper, and more efficient without sacrificing the rugged reliability that defined the design. These developments eventually led to the AKM, introduced in 1959, a lighter and easier to produce evolution rather than an entirely new rifle. It looked familiar, but beneath its simplicity lay years of accumulated engineering lessons learned through persistence, failure, and refinement. That evolution ensured the Kalashnikov family could be manufactured on an unprecedented scale. Yet numbers alone do not explain its influence. The true transformation came from political decisions unfolding far beyond the factory floor. Moscow increasingly viewed military aid as a strategic weapon in the growing Cold War. Friendly governments received equipment. Allied armies received training. Licensed factories appeared across Eastern Europe, Asia, and eventually beyond. Blueprints crossed borders alongside advisors. The rifle ceased to be merely a Soviet weapon. It became an instrument of foreign policy. But nobody anticipated just how quickly it would spread, or how many different flags it would one day fight beneath. The first real test was no longer inside a proving ground or production plant. It was waiting where bullets, fear, and history always deliver the final verdict. And once the AK-47 reached the battlefield, the world would never hear the sound of war the same way again. Morning mist drifted across the Korean peninsula as soldiers tightened their grips on unfamiliar weapons. But the conflict that truly revealed the AK-47's reputation would erupt years later in places where dense jungles swallowed entire battalions and mountains concealed enemies only meters away. By the late 1950s and early 1960s, Soviet shipments carrying crates stamped with Cyrillic markings were arriving across Eastern Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. Inside those wooden crates rested more than rifles. They carried a new philosophy of warfare. The AK-47 was designed for ordinary soldiers with minimal training, capable of functioning in conditions that would cripple many competing firearms. That combination proved irresistible to governments building new armies and revolutionary movements preparing for long guerrilla campaigns. Then came Vietnam. Thick humidity coated every piece of equipment. Rain fell without warning. Rivers overflowed. Mud seeped into boots, uniforms, and weapons alike. American troops entered the jungle equipped with sophisticated rifles built around speed and accuracy, while many North Vietnamese soldiers and Viet Cong fighters carried Kalashnikovs supplied directly or indirectly through Soviet and Chinese support. The battlefield became the ultimate engineering comparison. Gunfire echoed through dense vegetation, where visibility rarely extended beyond a few dozen meters. Patrols advanced cautiously, every snapping branch triggering nervous glances. Suddenly, the unmistakable sharp rhythm of automatic fire erupted from concealed positions. Soldiers dropped instinctively as leaves exploded overhead. The attackers often disappeared before anyone clearly saw them. The rifle's compact design, dependable operation, and powerful intermediate cartridge made it exceptionally effective during these close-range engagements. Yet the real surprise came hours later. After torrential rain, flooded trenches, and days without proper maintenance, many Kalashnikovs continued firing with astonishing consistency. Veterans from multiple conflicts later described the confidence that reliability created. They trusted the rifle because it rarely demanded perfect conditions. Dirt became an inconvenience rather than a disaster. Water seldom ended the fight. Even rough handling during exhausting marches seldom prevented the weapon from operating. That confidence spread quickly among armies around the world. Meanwhile, reports reaching Western intelligence agencies painted a troubling picture. Captured rifles consistently demonstrated impressive durability. Analysts examined every component, searching for hidden technological secrets. They found something unexpected. The AK-47 was not filled with revolutionary complexity. Instead, its genius lay in disciplined simplicity. Large clearances between moving parts allowed dirt and debris to pass without immediately stopping the action. The long-stroke gas piston delivered tremendous operating force. The rotating bolt locked securely, yet unlocked reliably under adverse conditions. None of these ideas alone transformed warfare. Their combination did. History almost forgot how unsettling those discoveries were for military planners. Sophisticated engineering had long been associated with battlefield superiority. Yet here stood a rifle proving that rugged practicality could sometimes outweigh technical refinement. Entire procurement philosophies began shifting. Reliability became a strategic advantage rather than merely a desirable feature. But another battlefield was quietly rewriting history far beyond Southeast Asia. Across Africa, nations fighting for independence found themselves armed with Kalashnikov rifles. In the Middle East, regular armies and irregular fighters alike adopted the design. During the Soviet intervention in Afghanistan, the strange reality emerged that both Soviet soldiers and many of their opponents carried different versions of the same family of weapons. Mountains echoed with nearly identical bursts of automatic fire from opposite sides of the conflict. It was a remarkable illustration of how completely the rifle had escaped the control of its creators. The next discovery shocked military historians. By the 1970s and 1980s, licensed production had expanded into numerous countries, while unlicensed copies appeared almost everywhere political instability existed. Factories in China, Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, Poland, Egypt, Yugoslavia, North Korea, and many others produced their own variants. Some followed Soviet specifications closely. Others introduced local modifications. Millions became tens of millions. Eventually, estimates suggested that well over 100 million Kalashnikov pattern rifles existed worldwide, making it the most widely produced firearm family in history. But quantity alone never explains legacy. Stories from soldiers revealed something deeper. Many remembered receiving little formal instruction before carrying the rifle into combat. Within hours, they understood its controls. Within days, they trusted it. Even when magazines dented, stocks cracked, or finishes wore away, the weapon often continued functioning. That reputation spread by word of mouth as much as through official military doctrine. Confidence became contagious. Yet this wasn't the biggest surprise. Hidden behind the AK-47's legendary image was an engineering evolution many people never noticed. The original 1947 model gradually disappeared from frontline production, replaced by improved variants like the AKM and later the AK-74. The name AK-47 remained famous, but countless rifles identified by that nickname were technically different models incorporating decades of refinement. Lighter stamped receivers, improved manufacturing methods, muzzle compensators, and updated internal components reflected continuous development rather than frozen perfection. The legend evolved while the world continued calling nearly every Kalashnikov simply an AK-47. Then, an extraordinary contradiction emerged. The rifle became both a symbol of state military power and revolutionary resistance at the same time. It appeared in the hands of national armies marching in organized formations and guerrilla fighters operating from remote forests. It was displayed during military parades beneath government flags, while also appearing on propaganda posters advocating rebellion. Few machines in modern history have represented such completely opposing political causes simultaneously. That paradox fascinated historians because it demonstrated that technology itself carries no ideology. People assign meaning to the tools they choose. Still, one chapter remained hidden from public view. Behind the global fame, Soviet archives contain stories of experimental designs, abandoned concepts, and internal debates that rarely reach the outside world. Engineers had continued searching for improvements, even while the rifle's reputation soared across continents. Some of those forgotten projects promised dramatic changes. Others exposed weaknesses the public never realized existed. What those classified experiments revealed would challenge the popular belief that the Kalashnikov had always been considered perfect from the very beginning. Perfection was never the goal. Survival was. Inside Soviet research facilities, engineers understood something the growing legend often ignored. Every successful weapon contains compromises, and the Kalashnikov was no exception. Classified reports documented concerns about long-range accuracy, manufacturing tolerances, and the increasing weight of modern infantry equipment. Designers explored experimental variants with different receivers, alternative calibers, folding stocks, optical sights, and even balanced recoil systems intended to improve controllability during automatic fire. Some prototypes showed promise. Others proved too expensive or too complicated for mass production. Many never advanced beyond testing rooms where only a handful of engineers and military officials ever saw them. History remembered the famous rifle, while countless forgotten versions quietly disappeared into archives. Then, an impossible decision had to be made. By the late 1960s and early 1970s, military thinking was changing once again. NATO's adoption of smaller, high-velocity cartridges forced Soviet planners to reconsider the future of infantry combat. They concluded that lighter ammunition would allow soldiers to carry more rounds while reducing recoil and improving controllability during rapid fire. The result was another major step in the Kalashnikov story. In 1974, the Soviet Union introduced the AK-74, chambered for the new 5.45 x 39mm cartridge. To many observers, It appeared to replace the legendary AK-47. In reality, it represented the continuation of the same design philosophy rather than its rejection. The operating system remained unmistakably Kalashnikov. Reliability stayed at the center of every engineering decision. The rifle had evolved because warfare itself had evolved. Yet the older design refused to disappear. Around the world, millions of 7.62mm rifles remained in military depots, police armories, and private stockpiles. Many countries continued producing them under license long after Soviet factories had shifted toward newer models. Others manufactured unlicensed copies with varying levels of quality. In conflict after conflict, decades-old Kalashnikovs emerged from storage and returned to the battlefield almost as if time had never passed. Their wooden furniture might be scarred, their blued finish worn away, their metal scratched by years of hard service. But many still functioned with remarkable dependability. That longevity became part of the rifle's mythology. Economically, the AK transformed the global arms landscape. Its relatively simple construction allowed enormous production numbers at comparatively low cost. Governments seeking affordable military equipment found it attractive. Newly independent nations adopted it because they needed dependable rifles more than technologically sophisticated ones. Logistics officers appreciated standardized ammunition and interchangeable components. Training instructors valued how quickly recruits learned its operation. The Kalashnikov became more than a weapon. It became an international military standard recognized across continents. But its influence extended beyond military doctrine. The silhouette of the rifle entered popular culture. Political symbolism, films, literature, video games, news photography, and even national iconography. It appeared on flags, monuments, memorials, and coats of arms. Few mechanical objects have ever become so instantly recognizable. To supporters, it represented resistance, liberation, and endurance. To critics, it symbolized decades of conflict and human suffering. Both interpretations reflected different chapters of the same complicated history. Even Mikhail Kalashnikov himself expressed mixed emotions later in life. Proud that his invention had defended his country, he also acknowledged the moral weight carried by a machine used in countless wars beyond anything he could have imagined during its development. He repeatedly emphasized that he designed the rifle for national defense, not for terrorism or criminal violence. The political decisions determining where it traveled belonged to governments, not engineers. His words revealed a timeless dilemma faced by inventors throughout history. Once an invention leaves the drawing board, its future rarely remains under the control of its creator. Today, more than 7 decades after its introduction, the Kalashnikov system continues serving in armed forces across the world. Modern variants feature polymer furniture, accessory rails, advanced optics, suppressors, and improved manufacturing techniques. Yet their mechanical heart still reflects principles established during the difficult years following the Second World War. Reliability, simplicity, durability. Those ideas survived changing technologies, shifting alliances, and the collapse of the very Soviet Union that gave birth to the rifle. Military historians continue debating whether any other firearm has exerted a greater influence on modern warfare. Engineers still study its operating system as an example of practical design. Museums display early production models behind glass, while collectors carefully preserve rare variants that once served on distant battlefields. The rifle that emerged from the determination of a wounded tank sergeant became one of the most influential mechanical designs of the 20th century, not because it was flawless, but because it consistently accomplished the task for which it had been created, under conditions where failure was simply unacceptable. The factories that first forged its steel have changed. The flags flying above many of those buildings have changed. Entire governments have risen and fallen. Wars have ended, and new ones have begun. Yet somewhere, in a remote mountain valley, a dense jungle, a frozen forest, or a forgotten desert outpost, the unmistakable sound of a Kalashnikov still echoes across the landscape. The rifle that was never supposed to exist never truly disappeared. It became something far larger than a single weapon. It became a permanent chapter in the history of modern warfare, and its shadow continues to stretch across every battlefield where reliability can mean the difference between life and death.